Okay guys, topic of the day is specialty guides for the Leigh FMT jig. Now this is the frame mortise and tenon jig. Typically you're cutting round mortises and round tenons to fit together perfectly. But in this video I want to look at the square tenon guides and why you might want to use square tenon guides and what practical applications those have with the Leigh FMT. Stick around, we're jumping into it right now. So with the Leigh FMT, it's a great jig for making mortise and tenon joints, and the typical application is just using one of these standard guides for making tenons. And what it does is it makes a tenon with rounded corners, and that just fits perfectly into the round mortises that this makes because it's a router based system. Obviously you're going to make rounded parts, and so that typically fits together just fine. But they also have an optional accessory for the FMT, which is these square guides. Now these work kind of on the same principle. They snap into a little area here on the left of the jig as the user faces the jig. But instead of the rounded profile, they've actually got a full square profile. And the stated tenon size that this will develop with a 1/2 inch spiral bit is stated right on the square tenon guide. So here's the standard tenon guide installed in the jig, and you can see it has kind of a rounded edge profile here. So if we retract this lever, there's a little finger push from underneath. We can remove the standard tenon guide, and we're going to try one of these specialty square tenon guides. Now you've got the stated size of the tenon printed right on the guide. This is a 3/8 by 3 inch in this case. We'll go ahead and put that into the recess and just press it in place. From there we'll go ahead and mount a 1/2 inch spiral bit on the router sled, and we'll get cutting some tenons. So much of the process for setting up your workpiece is the same whether you're using standard or specialty guides. Let's lock our table in here and slide the sight forward. And then you can just bring your workpiece up until it touches the bottom of the sight. And from there you can just clamp the two large clamps in place there. That'll secure your workpiece just fine. And then we'll go about centering the sight over the workpiece. Just unlock this handle again and that'll free up the table in 2 dimensions. So you can see the sight will move independently of the workpiece. This is how it retracts, and when it's out over the workpiece, it's your guide for centering things up over the workpiece. When your indicator is centered, just lock the handle back in place, and we're ready to route a tenon. Now you could probably scribe a line right on your workpiece to indicate the length of the tenon, but sometimes what I'll do is just plunge the bit until it contacts the workpiece itself, loosen up my depth stop rod, and just use a 1/2 inch brass setup gauge in this case. And I'll just set my stop so I know that I'll cut same length tenons every time. So there's a indexing pin on the other side of this router sled, and if you were to route mortise, for instance, you'd go in this central slot of the tenon guide, and that would help you make the mortise. In this case we're going to be on the outside of this square tenon guide and follow the shape that way to make our cut. Now initially we'll make a light clockwise climbing pass, and as we get a little closer to finished dimensions we'll go counterclockwise in the standard direction. It's kind of cool to get a first look at the tenon before you even pull it out of the jig, just to make sure you didn't miss any spots. You've got nice crisp shoulders and clean edges. Looks like we're ready to go ahead and pull that out of the jig. And since we're using the hollow chisel mortiser to make the mortise component, we can just use that same 1/2 inch setup block to set our depth stop on the mortiser. Now remember, this isn't the normal way you do things on the FMT. This is just for the specialty guides where we specifically wanted to make a square mortise, and we've used the square tenon guide to match that. So otherwise you just knock out your mortise like normal on the hollow chisel mortiser. Let's pull that tenon workpiece out and see how we did. And to me, this is one of the most amazing things about the FMT jig. You cannot cut tenons that clean and crisp with just dead smooth flat tenons with any other method, really. I mean, if you were to use a dado blade, even a relatively fine dado blade, you would probably be left with some scoring lines with most dado sets. So this is a real advantage if you wanted to do through mortise and tenons, for instance, for some arts and crafts furniture where part of the tenon might show. Even if you chamfer it over, you want that to be a really clean edge where it meets the mortise. So whether it's the square specialty guides on this FMT or whether it's the standard guides, you will notice that these are the cleanest tenons possible with these spiral Leigh bits. So let's see how we did for fit. If we just drop this down into the mortise from the hollow chisel mortiser. Oh, and actually we have a perfect fit on that as far as the thickness of the tenon. We're also flush on both of these were planed at the same time, so right to 3/4, we expected that. But what's nice is we just dropped right in. I mean, this is a good amount of squeaky friction there, but the fit is good. I wouldn't make any adjustments to that. Now, if you do have to make an adjustment to the thickness of the tenon, that can be done with this knob here. Now, if you twist the knob clockwise, that will make for a tighter fit. Counterclockwise will cut more of the tenon away and make for a looser fit. But as described, our fit was perfect right from the recommended setting, just reading the instruction manual. So we're dead on. We're ready to go ahead and bang out the rest of those tenons. Experience, once you get the jig set up, the fit is going to be just the same each and every time. Nice snug fit with flush faces. Now there is a limitation with this sort of specialty guide. I don't even see it as a drawback, but it's just kind of a built-in limitation to the system. And it has to do with these square specialty guides. There's just only so many combinations that you can use, but it really only factors in if you want to have a shouldered tenon. So if you need the tenon to look like that, with the shoulders trimmed up so that nothing shows on the side of the mortise, why then, you know, you've got a few combinations to work with. So you can go online and find these specialty guides and see all the sizes that they come in. They are clearly marked, and I would say the biggest benefit to them is just how crisp and clean the tenons come out. Better than anything you can cut on the table saw, certainly. And they're just the cleanest, sharpest tenons I've ever made in the workshop, and I've been at it for 20 years. So that really impressed me with this system. That little fact is true whether you're using the standard guides or the specialty square tenons. Either way, you're going to make really crisp, clean tenons. Mostly when it matters, though, is for something that it's a through tenon, and that's the situation where you may want to use specialty guides and a hollow chisel mortiser. Hey, I'm Willie Sandry. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.